Hello, I'm Toro, and this is the Great Blunders. Every great civilization, every genius plan, every bold idea has its moments of unexpected failure. In this series, we gently explore the missteps, mistakes, and strange decisions that changed history, softly told, one blunder at a time. There's no drama here, just quiet hindsight, calm reflection, and a little curiosity. So settle in, breathe deep, and let's revisit a moment when the world didn't quite go as planned. Hello, my sleepy traveler, and welcome once more to Toro's History Lullabies, where the past floats gently through the quiet folds of night. I'm Toro, and as the world hushes around us, I invite you to join me in a story that drifts like snow, soft, vast, and full of wonder. Tonight, in our series called The Great Blunders, we explore not failure, but fragility, a moment when certainty slipped into silence. We'll wander back into the age of empires to follow the steady footsteps of Napoleon Bonaparte, a man of thunder, as he walks, unknowingly, into a Russian winter. So lie back, let your breath slow, and let us drift into the mist of time. The world was quieter then, though never still. It was the year 1812, and Europe, that old continent of crowns and quarrels, was trembling under the weight of change. Kingdoms had risen and fallen. Borders had blurred. And one man, more than any other, had become the architect of this new shape. Napoleon Bonaparte. Born on the island of Corsica, he was once a boy with sharp eyes and soft ambition, a child of revolution, shaped by the collapse of the old order. As France tore away from monarchy and chaos, Napoleon rose like a flame climbing a candle wick. By the time our story begins, he is no longer just a soldier. He is emperor, commander, Symbol. His armies had thundered through Italy, Prussia, Austria, Spain. He had crowned kings and written new laws. He had redrawn the map with a sweep of his hand. The world looked at him not just with fear, but awe. And yet, beneath the laurels of glory, ambition stirred. The kind that doesn't sleep. The kind that whispers, "What next?" Napoleon's great enemy remained across the water, Britain, proud and persistent. Though his armies ruled the land, the British ruled the sea, and their ships slipped between continents, trading, influencing, resisting. To weaken them, Napoleon had created what he called the Continental System, a blockade of trade, a wide-spanning embargo across Europe meant to starve British commerce. It required unity. It required obedience. And one country, vast and distant, grew weary of obedience. Russia. Under Tsar Alexander I, a tall, thoughtful man, as much philosopher as monarch, Russia had once walked beside France. There had been promises and pacts, diplomacy and handshakes, but trust wears thin in cold climates. The Russians began trading again with Britain quietly, subtly, defiantly. And Napoleon felt the sting of betrayal. It wasn't merely political. It was personal. An emperor ignored. A system defied. The cords of control beginning to fray. He saw only one answer. Not letters, not meetings, but movement. He would march eastward, into the Russian heart. He would humble the Tsar. He would end the disobedience not with words, but with boots. And so, in the spring of that fateful year, a massive army gathered. It was called the Grand Army, the Great Army, but it was more than French. It was a patchwork of Europe, Italians, Austrians, Bavarians, Saxons, Poles, Dutchmen, even conscripted Spaniards, still bitter from war. Nearly 600,000 men stood beneath the eagle of Napoleon, an assembly of pride and precision. They carried rifles, sabers, drums, and dreams. They marched not just for conquest, but for destiny. And yet, beyond the Niemen River, stretching eastward into the pale horizon, lay a land they did not understand. Russia was not like Prussia or Austria. It was not tightly wound with roads and farms. It was space, silent sky. Napoleon believed in quick war, swift strikes, decisive battles. But the Russian countryside whispered something different. It whispered of distance, of seasons, of patience. And so, under a sky that smelled of summer grass, the great invasion began, unaware that it was already unraveling. The river crossing was quiet. It was June, a month of warmth, of wheat, of brightness. And under that generous summer sky, Napoleon's army stepped into Russia. No just the slow murmur of thousands of feet and the creak of countless wagons, heavy with hope. From the outside, it looked invincible. 600,000 men, a nation's pride multiplied across borders. Soldiers young and grizzled, officers polished with confidence, camp followers, cooks, medics, horses, cannons, carriages full of fine wine, silver cutlery, and velvet. It wasn't just a military campaign. It was theater, a procession of power, a mirror held up to the world to reflect the glow of French dominion. And yet, even now, the cracks were forming. The first was logistical. Napoleon, brilliant in battle, often overlooked the practicalities of peace. The distances in Russia were vast, the roads poor, and the maps, if they existed at all, were vague sketches of foreign soil. Every step forward lengthened the supply lines. The wagons couldn't keep up. Horses grew thin. Men grew thirsty. And the land gave them nothing. Wherever they marched, the Russians retreated, burning towns, smashing mills, destroying crops. The policy was simple and brutal, scorched earth. If the French wanted food or shelter, they would find only ashes. Napoleon had planned for a war of weeks. Instead, he found a war of waiting. By mid-July, the sun beat heavily. The plains shimmered with dust. Dysentery bloomed in the camps. The heat pressed on their shoulders like a hand. Still, they advanced. The Tsar's generals, Barclay de Tolly and later Mikhail Kutuzov, understood their terrain better than any map. They refused to fight. They let time and space do the wounding. Napoleon seethed. He needed a battle, a swift, shattering clash that would bring the Tsar to terms. Instead, he found only smoke, silence, and endless road. By August, the army was already diminished. Heat stroke, hunger, and desertion had stolen tens of thousands. But pride pulled them forward. And then, Borodino. It was September when they reached it, a small village perched like a stone before Moscow. And here, at last, the Russians stopped retreating. They would fight. The Battle of Borodino was not elegant. It was not one of Napoleon's surgical strikes. It was thunder and blood and stubbornness. At dawn, the French advanced, cannon to cannon, musket to musket. For hours, the lines surged back and forth. Charges broke on bayonets. The air was thick with smoke, sweat, and soot. Napoleon watched from a hill, wrapped in thought. He did not commit his imperial guard. He hesitated, uncertain. By nightfall, the Russians had retreated. The French held the field. But there was no cheer. Both sides had suffered horribly. Nearly 70,000 men had fallen, and still the Russian army lived. Moscow lay ahead, an ancient city of churches, bells, and books. The Grand Army entered it on September 14th. But the city did not welcome them. It was empty, abandoned. No officials remained, no diplomats, no precision, only the soft echoes of footsteps on stone and the crows circling the spires. And then, fire. Some say it was sabotage, others chaos, but the city began to burn, first in corners, then in columns, orange and red, curling through streets and alleys. Napoleon stayed in the Kremlin, hoping for peace, waiting for a message that never came. Tsar Alexander would not surrender. And as the embers cooled, the cold began. The first frost came in October. Nothing dramatic, just a breath, a glaze, the kind of cold that clings to fingertips, that whispers of what is to come. Napoleon gave the order to retreat. And so began the second, slower march, not forward now, but backward, not in glory, but in desperation. The Russian winter is not a sudden thing. It creeps. It folds itself into the wind. It waits until men are tired, and then it strikes. By November, it was unforgiving. Snow fell, not gently, but as a judgment. Boots split, coats froze stiff. Campfires flickered and died. Horses collapsed in the snow, their ribs like broken ladders. The soldiers, once proud and polished, now moved in silence, their eyes hollow, their hands wrapped in scraps of stolen fabric. Some marched barefoot through ice. Some dragged each other. Some simply lay down and did not rise. And the Cossacks came. The ghost riders of the steppe, light, fast, and ruthless. They attacked the edges of the column, slashed supply wagons, harassed the rear guard. Like wolves, they waited for weakness, and weakness was everywhere. The Grand Army was now no army at all. It was a procession of hunger, a trail of loss. When they reached the Berezina River in late November, it was partially frozen. Bridges were built in haste. Thousands drowned. Cannons were abandoned. It was chaos. And Napoleon, no longer the conductor of empire, but a man in winter, left his army behind. He raced for Paris, wrapped in furs and silence. He needed to protect his power. When the last frozen remnants of the army staggered back across the Niemen in December, they numbered less than 100,000. 600,000 had crossed in. Less than a sixth returned. They had not been defeated by guns, but by time, distance, weather, and will. And in that long white march, history shifted its weight. When winter lifted its white veil, it revealed a continent that had begun to stir. Napoleon's Grand Army, once the pride of Europe, the mirror of his power, had melted into memory. The retreat from Russia had not just shattered an army, it had fractured an image. The image of invincibility. News traveled slowly in those days, carried by writers, shaped by rumor. But across Prussia, Austria, and the German states, the story was the same. Napoleon had lost. Not just a battle, not even just a campaign, but something deeper, the illusion of mastery. His enemies had seen him bleed, and they remembered. Prussia, long bowed under French dominance, quietly began to remobilize. Austria reevaluated its loyalties. Even Sweden, distant and cautious, began to glance toward coalitions. Britain, ever watchful across the Channel, seized its moment, sending arms, gold, and promises to fuel a renewed alliance. Napoleon had returned to Paris swiftly, far ahead of his broken army. Ever the strategist, he framed the disaster not as defeat, but as necessity. He spun stories of noble hardship, of strategic withdrawal, of Russian barbarism. And yet, beneath the gilded language, everyone saw the frost. France began to conscript again. New soldiers, younger now and fewer trained. The cracks in manpower were papered over with loyalty, but paper is thin in winter. And all the while, the men who had marched to Russia, or what few remained, returned home with eyes no longer proud, but vacant. They brought no spoils, no victory songs, only stories. Stories of endless snow, of boots wrapped in rags, of comrades who disappeared in the night, swallowed by the cold, of wagons burned just to feel warmth, of frostbite creeping like shadow into bone. In Russia, the fires of Moscow eventually faded, and the city began to rebuild, slowly, painfully, with pride. For the Russian people, the campaign had proven something profound, that their land could defend itself, not through weaponry, but through sheer endurance. The Great Invasion had become a national memory, a symbol of survival, and the Russian soul, weathered and vast, had won not by fighting but by waiting. Monuments were erected, bells were cast from melted French cannon, songs were written, and in the hearts of Russians, a quiet defiance had bloomed, one that would echo across future centuries. Back in France, the emperor's troubles multiplied. In 1813, he fought the coalition armies at Leipzig, the Battle of the Nations. There he lost again. The web of alliances that had once feared him now pulled tight. By 1814, Allied armies marched into Paris. Napoleon abdicated, not with a bang, but with a breath. He was exiled to the island of Elba, a flickering ember, briefly apart from the fire. Though he would return once more in 1815 for one final blaze at Waterloo, it was the retreat from Russia that had turned the tide. The real fall had not come on a battlefield. It had come in the snow. The ice did not shout, the wind did not charge, but it had waited, and in its waiting, it had undone an empire. And now we exhale. We've traveled far, dear listener, not just through snow and silence, but through time, through pride, through pain, and through the places in history where noise gives way to stillness. So, what do we take with us? Not judgment. That is not our way. This is not a tale of ridicule, but of recognition. For beneath the frost-bitten uniforms, beneath the grand plans and gilded maps, we find something very human, the belief that we are ready for what lies ahead. Napoleon believed that. He had shaped empires, moved mountains, survived revolutions. He had trusted, as many of us do, in his past success, in his vision, in his momentum. But the world does not always bow to will. Sometimes it resists not with fury, but with slowness, with silence, with snow. This, perhaps, is the deepest lesson of 1812, that greatness is not measured by triumph alone, but by humility in the face of the unknown. Napoleon did not lose because he lacked brilliance. He lost because he assumed brilliance was enough. It is easy in life to press forward simply because we have already begun, to keep walking deeper into the cold, hoping the weather will shift, hoping the goal is just around the bend. But sometimes wisdom lives in the pause, in the reconsidering, in the courage to turn back before we're forced to. And even in failure, there is beauty. Because from this great unraveling came insight, caution, a deeper awareness of the power of patience, of the rhythm of nature, of the quiet voices that whisper, slow down. So if you too ever find yourself deep in the snow of your own ambition, unsure, overextended, breathless in the cold, know that you are not alone. Even emperors have wandered too far. And even in retreat, we learn. The snow, you see, does not punish. It reminds. Thank you, my quiet traveler, for for wandering through the snowfall of history with me tonight. If this slow unraveling of Napoleon's winter march brought you peace, or simply a moment of stillness, I invite you to softly like and subscribe, so we may meet again beneath the stars. There are many more stories waiting in the hush of time. Stories of missteps, of human echoes, of great blunders wrapped in gentle understanding. But for now, may your dreams be warm, may your breath be slow, and may you drift away knowing even the boldest among us are sometimes simply learning one step at a time. Good night from Toro's History Lullabies. And next time, we'll explore another turn of fortune, a different blunder in a different place, still wrapped in moonlight. Sleep well, Crescent Moon.